talk before you The Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development will come to order. I note there's a quorum present. Without objections, the chair is authorized to call a recess at any time. It is truly a great honor to be entrusted with ensuring taxpayer dollars are used efficiently and effectively. With that honor comes serious responsibilities. If we're going to ask taxpayers to dole out more of their hard-earned money, it should be worth it. Unfortunately, AmeriCorps has a long history of abusing taxpayer dollars. AmeriCorps is entrusted with over $1 billion of taxpayer funds each year, with the result of a failure of 8 consecutive audits. In 2023, the AmeriCorps Inspector General issued a management challenge report detailing significant challenges to the that AmeriCorps faces. This includes being unable to detect fraud. We have no idea when AmeriCorps will be able to have a clean audit again. In fact, this year's audit includes 78 recommendations still open, even after AmeriCorps said it addressed 20 last year. Normally, this will give folks a pause. If a bank failed 8 consecutive audits and was unable to detect fraud, would you still be willing to give your hard-earned money to that bank? Apparently, the answer to the Democrats is yes. Democrats want to expand this agency and increase its budget to $80 million more in taxpayer funds, despite its long-standing history of financial failure. The Biden-Harris administration has also been routing its radical climate agenda through AmeriCorps' foreign funding. In September 2023, President Biden announced its American Climate Corps, ACC initiative, which used AmeriCorps dollars, taxpayer dollars, to achieve so-called environmental justice. It makes no sense to expand this agency or give it more money when it continually fails to meet basic accountability standards. Every time its representatives come before this committee, AmeriCorps assures us that they will implement reforms, and year after year, nothing changes. We can tell AmeriCorps to modernize and reform until we're blue in the face, but nothing will change unless we recognize the system is built on a flawed idea. It is time to admit that this is a failed program that needs a complete overhaul or elimination. It should be on the Doge chopping block. I recognize that many of AmeriCorps' programs are well-intentioned, but this doesn't outweigh its significant problems. Too often, the problem has been to drain on the taxpayer funds with fewer results to show that it's worth the cost. Our country is known for its robust civil institutions. AmeriCorps aside, the U.S. is often ranked as the most generous country in the world when it comes down to money donated or time given to charity. Americans don't need federal bureaucrats telling them what to do, what they naturally do. We also don't need a federal program to do what the private sector accomplishes very well at half the cost. Bottom line, AmeriCorps' long history of being unable to manage resources entrusted to it with any sense of accuracy or fiscal responsibility is shameful. I look forward to shedding additional light on this issue and bringing a sense of accountability. Before I recognize the ranking member for her opening statement, I wanted to make a few moments to recognize our committee chairman, Dr. Fox. I was fortunate to play 40 years ago with the Raiders when they used to win football games all the time. And there was a culture that was developed by our owner, Al Davis. It was a culture that no matter where you came from, you were proud to step on the field, you gave everything you can to make sure you were a good member of that team. I must say I've been very proud to experience that again. What Dr. Fox has done for this committee is, first of all, highlighted as a national security issue that we need to make sure that we're presenting the very best in the world in terms of our young people, and she's done that. To say that we have now a committee that is ranked as a priority to our conference, along with China in the budget, there's education and workforce. So I can't say enough about the honor to have had a chance to serve with Dr. Fox. The good thing is she's not leaving us. The legacy will continue here on the Hill. But I just want to take a few minutes to say thank you so much. And then I'll pass it over to my ranking member.
Thank you, Chairman Owen. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. It's so good to see you again, Michael Smith, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Stephen Ravis. This morning, we are meeting to examine the role of AmeriCorps, a vital force in strengthening communities through service opportunities. But we cannot ignore its financial struggles, which have hindered its mission for years. As a committee and members of Congress, our responsibility is clear. We must equip AmeriCorps with the resources, oversight, and accountability it needs to succeed. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle see this as a chance to eliminate AmeriCorps in the name of government efficiency. But let's be clear. This isn't about fixing problems for Republicans. It's about playing politics. Despite the financial struggles that AmeriCorps has dealt with for years, committee Republicans have neglected proper oversight in accordance with House rules until now, when it is politically convenient for them to do so. It's downright shameful and honestly a bit pathetic that Republicans are twisting AmeriCorps' financial hurdles, which the agency is already addressing, into an excuse to bully and politicize an organization that stands for the very heart of American democracy. Despite challenges, AmeriCorps has consistently delivered for Americans. Since 1993, AmeriCorps has provided vital relief to millions of Americans, managing 3,300 projects annually and offering service opportunities to 200,000 members and volunteers. These projects have been crucial to disaster recovery, from rebuilding homes after Hurricane Katrina to delivering water filters during the Flint water crisis. During the COVID-19 pandemic, AmeriCorps supported students, fought food insecurity, aided homebound seniors, and coordinated vaccination clinics, proving itself essential in our nation's recovery. Additionally, AmeriCorps doesn't just build communities, it builds futures by creating pathways to higher education for thousands of Americans. Members serving in AmeriCorps programs are eligible for education awards to cover the cost of higher education and job training. AmeriCorps members have received over $5 billion to help them pay for college or repay student loans. And let me remind this committee that fixing the student loan crisis should be one of our many, many goals. If solving the student loan crisis is our mission, gutting a program that does exactly that is downright absurd. AmeriCorps plays a vital role in the lives of countless Americans, which is why we must acknowledge and help fix its financial challenges. We as Congress should be in the business of solving problems, not eliminating vital programs. Since 2017, AmeriCorps has struggled to implement a strong financial management system, leaving it without the tools to manage grantees or prevent waste and mismanagement properly. The agency's financial hurdles are clear, with 7 straight disclaimed audits since FY 2024 and outdated systems. But these issues are solvable, and committee Democrats do not take responsibility for overseeing AmeriCorps lightly. But there's no reason to dismantle an agency that serves millions when the path forward is to invest in the proper oversight and support to get it back on track. To do so would rob Americans of much-needed aid, erase jobs, and set a dangerous precedent of using government oversight as a stick to beat government institutions with instead of a constructive tool to aid them. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on how AmeriCorps plans to work with Congress to ensure strong continuing oversight and the development of robust improvement to address the agency's ongoing management challenges. Before I yield back, I want to acknowledge that this is Chairwoman Fox's final hearing with this committee. Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you for your years of commitment to students and to workers. I met you during my first year on this committee, and I believe I know your heart. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, appreciate that. Pursuant to Committee Rules 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word, formatted by 5 p.m., 14 days after this hearing, which is December 26, 2024. And without objections, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other material referenced during this hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I note for the subcommittee that some of my colleagues who are not permanent members of the subcommittee may be wavering on for the purpose of today's hearing. I will now turn to the introduction of our two distinguished guests. The first witness is the Honorable Michael D. Smith, who is the Chief Executive Officer of AmeriCorps, who's located in Washington, D.C. Ms. Smith is the 8th CEO of AmeriCorps. He was nominated by President Biden in June 2021 and confirmed by the U.S. Senate in December 2021. Prior to that, he served as Executive Director of My Brother's Keepers Alliance and Director of Youth Opportunity Programs at the Obama Foundation. The second witness is Mr. Stephen Ravis, who is the Acting Inspector General of AmeriCorps in Washington, D.C. Mr. Ravis is AmeriCorps' Acting Inspector General, a role he assumed May 2023. Mr. Ravis has more than 10 years of experience in the Inspector General community, including at AmeriCorps as Acting Director, Inspector General, as Counselor to the Inspector General. We thank the witnesses for being here today and look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to community rules, I would ask that you each limit your oral representation to 5-minute summary of your written statement. I'd also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. I will first recognize Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Chairwoman Fox, Chairman Owens, Ranking Members Scott and Wilson, and members of the subcommittee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. AmeriCorps' mission of improving the lives of Americans through service is personal to me. I was raised by parents who were just 16 years old when I was born. We didn't have much money, but we had love and abundance, and we had a community who believed in an idea that our neighbors' children are all of our children. My mom sent me to my local Boys and Girls Club because she told me that she needed inexpensive daycare, but she got so much more. There, I met my first AmeriCorps foster grandparents and VISTA members, who alongside other caring adults lifted me up and kept me in line. There is no way that a kid like me could go from relying on welfare to leading a federal agency had it not been for everyday Americans who made service their life's work. Americans, like the 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps seniors volunteers who show up for their neighbors in need in every state, in every one of your districts, every single day. They represent America at its very best. That's why investment in sound financial management and internal controls is so important. AmeriCorps cannot deliver on our mission if our foundation is not stable. When I became CEO just 3 years ago, AmeriCorps faced significant financial management challenges stemming from decades of underinvestment in systems, operations, and people, resulting in 5 years of disclaimed audit opinions prior to my arrival. I outlined a plan for this committee 2 years ago to put AmeriCorps on a path to financial and operational success. We are now implementing that multi-year plan, and it is working. We downgraded one material weakness. We closed one significant deficiency and one former material weakness. We remediated an audit noncompliance and closed more than 25 financial statement audit recommendations. We have made historic investments in technology modernization and financial systems, and we've bolstered our expertise, including the agency's first ever senior advisor on financial reform, who is joining me today. We completed nearly 100% of remediation activities for 5 targeted material weaknesses, which should be reflected in next year's audit. And we closed 9 of 10 GAO audit recommendations to ensure AmeriCorps' fraud risk management practices more fully aligned with their leading practices. As we rebuild the agency's operational infrastructure, AmeriCorps continues to do what we do best: mobilize millions of Americans to strengthen communities and improve lives. For every $1 invested in AmeriCorps, more than $17 are returned to the taxpayer. We see that return every day. We see it in an AmeriCorps member in Virginia Recovery Corps who survived substance abuse. She told me that AmeriCorps was the only door that opened when all other doors closed. We see it in the PowerCorps PHL AmeriCorps member in Philadelphia, who shared that he was once on a path from the school to prison pipeline, or worse, but AmeriCorps saved his life. And we see it in the nearly 1,000 AmeriCorps members who have supported recovery from Hurricanes Helene and Milton in Florida, North Carolina, and across the Southeast. One Asheville, North Carolina resident whose father's home was flooded wrote to us and said, "The AmeriCorps team underpromised and over-delivered at every step. This group gave us more than relief, they gave us hope." As AmeriCorps drives tangible community impact around our country, we remain committed to strengthening the foundation of our mission. With continued support from Congress and in collaboration with our Inspector General, AmeriCorps will achieve a clean audit opinion in 2026, and our members and our volunteers will continue to create hope and opportunity everywhere they serve. I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much. I now recognize Mr. Ravis.
Chairs Fox and Owens, Ranking Members Scott and Wilson, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the work of the Office of Inspector General. I've had the privilege of serving as the Acting Inspector General since May of 2023, and have served within this OIG for more than 5 years. My testimony today focuses on the top challenges facing AmeriCorps. There are 3 things that I hope you take away from this testimony. First, work is being done to improve financial management, but fiscal year 2025 will be an important year. Second, we would like to see the agency do more to hold grantees accountable, especially in the area of time card fraud. And third, the agency's modernization initiative is important and necessary, but better project management is required to avoid further significant cost overruns. Our oversight work demonstrates that improving financial management is the agency's top challenge. AmeriCorps still needs the appropriate people, processes, and systems for its success. The OIG conducts annual audits of AmeriCorps' financial statements, which answer the question of whether the agency is handling its money appropriately. In fiscal year 2024, AmeriCorps could not demonstrate that its financial statements accurately and fairly presented the agency's financial condition for the 8th consecutive year. The auditors have therefore issued a disclaimer of opinion. Our fiscal year 2024 audit identifies 11 material weaknesses. 8 of these have been known to the agency since our fiscal year 2017 and 2018 audits. AmeriCorps' lack of processes and internal controls over financial reporting led to a negative $62 million National Service Trust fund balance with Treasury at year end. In addition, AmeriCorps' own assessment of its internal controls determined that its internal control program had only 1 out of 17 GAO internal control principles functioning effectively. AmeriCorps has longstanding open recommendations related to operational and financial aspects of its grant processes, a key area for this grant-making agency. While significant work remains, the agency took some positive steps in fiscal year 2024. AmeriCorps has prioritized financial reform and has indicated it remediated 4 material weaknesses as of the end of fiscal year 2024. While the agency has not yet implemented this work, we look forward to testing and validating it in fiscal year 2025. This, plus the 20 recommendations closed from prior years during this year's audit, are promising steps. The support and dedication of a new administration's leadership team to continue these efforts will be critical to the agency's progress. The second top challenge facing AmeriCorps is preventing and detecting fraud in its programs. Grant fraud deprives deserving beneficiaries of essential funding and erodes the public trust in national service programs. Timesheet fraud is prevalent in many AmeriCorps programs. A significant amount of AmeriCorps funds are tied to hours served. When those hours are inflated or misrepresented, AmeriCorps funds are expended that should not have been issued. One recent audit found that a large grantee and its subgrantees failed to comply with federal and AmeriCorps timekeeping with a monetary impact of over $6.6 million. The subgrantees lacked documentation supporting the members' actual service hours performed in AmeriCorps programs and other activities. The agency has declined to disallow over $3 million in education awards related to service hours that lack appropriate documentation. The agency initially agreed to claw back $3 million in grant funds given to the subgrantee with a non-compliant AmeriCorps program. However, conversations with the agency within the last few days seem to indicate that that decision to claw back these funds is not yet final. Also problematic is the agency's decision to change its terms and conditions to dial back accountability by removing the longstanding requirement that grantees record all hours served by members regardless of the funding source. This decision eliminates the only way for AmeriCorps and the OIG to verify that the hours billed were not also billed to another federal grant or funding source. Since I submitted my written testimony, the agency has engaged with us again on this topic, and its initial proposal is a step forward. We have continued to have frequent dialogue with AmeriCorps on the importance of holding grantees accountable, and I'm encouraged by AmeriCorps' recent decision to claw back over $560,000 from a large municipality. Third and finally, AmeriCorps faces significant challenges modernizing its information technology. The agency relies on outdated legacy systems and manual stopgap measures to carry out key operations. Recently, we issued a management alert informing the agency that the cost to develop and maintain a new grants management system will likely exceed $18 million, more than double the original contract amount due to a number of missteps. We are still looking at this issue, and our suggested actions focus on making improvements to its contracting process and oversight of major contracts to avoid this issue in the future. Improving financial management, preventing detecting fraud, and modernizing IT are the agency's top challenges. In particular, financial reform is the linchpin of AmeriCorps' success. We look forward to testing items the agency asserts it has remediated in fiscal year 2025 audit. I'd be pleased to answer the committee's questions.
Thank you so much for that. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I will begin the process. Ms. Ravis, first of all, I want to thank you for how well you've communicated with our committee, being very proactive. This is a very necessary process and to get this whole process resolved. So, Ms. Ravis, in November 2023, the Inspector General reported that AmeriCorps developed a new anti-fraud course, but did not require grantees to take it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, I understand that this year was the first year AmeriCorps implemented any sort of fraud education requirement. However, is it correct that only a single staff member per grant is required to participate, and that only applies to some programs, not all?
That's correct. It's just a single staff member in each grantee, and I believe it doesn't apply to VISTA and RSVP programs right now. However, I will say that the agency, this is the only open recommendation from the GAO's recent audit, and the agency, I believe, plans to implement, fully implement that recommendation in 2025.
My concern, I guess, is it's taken 7 years to even come to this point, right? It's been quite a few years in which this has been happening, and we've not been able to kind of get to the source. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I agree with you.
Ms. Smith, AmeriCorps has not passed an audit since 2017. Do you believe AmeriCorps is focusing its time and resources on showing that it can handle taxpayer funds responsibly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I absolutely do, and I think if you looked at the Inspector General's testimony, our former Inspector General, they will tell you they've never seen a leadership team that has made the kind of commitment that we've made today, and that's why we're seeing some of the results that I reported on in my opening remarks.
Okay. 2 years ago, AmeriCorps proudly announced its first ever hiring of a Chief Diversity and Inclusive Officer. In your 2024 annual report, goal number 1 of AmeriCorps is to advance racial equity. Ms. Smith, does AmeriCorps prioritize guarantees who claim to address racial equity?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can you repeat the last part of that question?
Does AmeriCorps prioritize guarantees who claim to address racial equities? Is that a part of the requirement?
AmeriCorps does value grantees that believe in equity.
Okay. Your annual report also sets a goal that 80% of AmeriCorps employees would agree or strongly agree that DEI is integrated into the agency. Is that correct?
I would have to double check the record, but I believe so.
Okay. How does indoctrinating employees on DEI and integrating DEI into grants help address the waste and fraud that we've been seeing all this time and the lack of being able to even have an audit taken care of?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. We're proud of the work that we've done on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So many of our AmeriCorps staff or AmeriCorps members themselves worked as teachers, worked in the social sector. And so the priorities for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at AmeriCorps is making sure that everyone, no matter where they come from, has the opportunity to take part in this transformative work. And so we want to make sure that we reduce any barriers to service. I am proud, for instance, that 30% of our funding goes to rural grantees. I need to know that there might be a reason that a member of a rural community isn't showing up because they have broadband issues. I need to know that a member of our tribal community that's remote might have a challenge with our fingerprinting requirements because they have to cross a frozen river in order, like a Scammon Bay grantee that I saw, in order to get to one of our fingerprinting centers. I need to know.
Are we kind of conflating what DEI really means? That at the end of the day, DEI is how we look, is our background, has nothing to do with merit. And merit is really, I think, what we're missing in terms of getting this program taken care of. We need the best talent, right? Would you agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, I agree
The best
with you 100%.
speakers, the best innovators, the best people who can sit down and add. So I'm having a problem with seeing how DEI has anything to do with any of that.
Mr. Chairman, the way we look about it is making sure there are no barriers to service for anyone, and that no matter what community that you come from, you have an opportunity to serve. And that's why we spend so much time thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
Well, it should be about return on investment, and obviously we're failing in that area. 8 straight audits. I think AmeriCorps spends its time and energy on DEI staff to spread divisive ideology, which it does, instead of the focusing on the taxpayer funds. I think the American public deserves better. I think we should be looking at meritocracy, how to get this taken care of. The fact is there's a lot of money being wasted, a lot of fraud not being able to be found. It's because we don't have the right talent, the right mindset to take care of that. It is that time to address this very wasteful program. So with that, I'd like to yield to my ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ravis, in the FY 2024 audit, the agency's external auditors noted the agency's progress, closing 20 out of 95 recommendations from the FY 2022 report. While 3 new recommendations have been added, leading to 78 outstanding recommendations, it seems AmeriCorps is finally making some real progress. Do you agree with that characteristic? And can you expound on that progress?
Sure, happy to. Yes, I agree that AmeriCorps is making progress. As I mentioned, AmeriCorps indicated that it has remediated 4 material weaknesses. We have not been able to test those yet. We'll be testing them in 2025 once they're implemented. But you're right, they have closed 20. They closed 20 recommendations. They added 3. That's compared to fiscal 2023, where they only closed 7, and we added over 20.
Okay. Ranking, Mr. Smith, AmeriCorps funds over 3,300 projects with over 200,000 volunteers serving communities across the nation. Can you tell us how vital AmeriCorps is to our country and how impactful the work volunteers and members do?
Congresswoman, thank you so much for that question. I tell people I have the best job in the federal government all the time, and it's because I really get to see America at its best. It's people coming together, uniting across differences from all different parts of our country, really showing that when the going gets tough, America gets tougher, and Americans want to unite. Whether that's after a hurricane, a fire, or a flood, helping their neighbors in need, whether that is working on coastal erosion, whether that's helping our kids, addressing the gap in teachers that we have, whether it's our public health workforce, and really addressing that through programs like Public Health AmeriCorps. So today, as I mentioned earlier, we have about 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that are serving in 40,000 locations. That's in our Boys and Girls Clubs, that's in our Salvation Armies, that's in our American Red Crosses, and if they were here talking to you, they would say that AmeriCorps members are vital for them to be able to do their operational work because AmeriCorps members bring force multiplication and more muscle. And when I think about AmeriCorps, I think about a triple bottom line. I think about the impact that it has on our communities. I think about the impact that it has on the members, 75% of whom, by the way, end up staying in the broader social sectors. They go from being an AmeriCorps tutor or a mentor to becoming a teacher. And I think about it from societal benefits, when you have a less isolated society, more social cohesion, more civic engagement after people serve their country.
Okay, can you discuss diversity within AmeriCorps volunteers, and how are these volunteers recruited?
Thank you so much. One, I would say I am proud of the fact that AmeriCorps is decentralized. We are not a big bloated Washington program. Most of our AmeriCorps state and national dollars go through our governor-appointed state service commissions. Mr. Chairman, I was recently with the governor and Mrs. Cox in Utah, where they launched the One Utah Service Fellowship, extraordinary program that's helping folks serve while they're finishing their schooling. And so those state commissions help to make a lot of decisions on where the dollars are going. And then we have a network of thousands of grantees to make sure that Michael Smith in Washington isn't deciding what's needed in Florida or what's needed in Utah, to make sure that the people, the force multipliers that are AmeriCorps members, are really being directed to local challenges. I'm also now proud to report that AmeriCorps looks like America. It is more ethnically diverse, or as ethnically diverse than the country. 40% of AmeriCorps members come from low-income households. As I mentioned earlier, 30% come from rural communities. And so we see that because this is really a ground-up and not a top-down program.
Mr. Smith, in Miami-Dade County, we have AmeriCorps volunteers in some of our most challenged neighborhoods and challenged schools. And most of those schools are, I guess we could say, 90% African American. How do we make sure that those schools are serviced by African American volunteers? Because presently they're not.
Congresswoman, thank you for that question. I would say, one, there are no quotas for AmeriCorps service. One of the things that I am proud of, though, is that more and more AmeriCorps members are coming from the communities where they're serving, and that is wonderful, so that they can see an opportunity to serve in their own communities, and they understand the trials and challenges that their students have gone through. The other beautiful thing about AmeriCorps, though, is it brings people together. There might be someone from Utah or North Carolina that is coming to serve alongside folks in Overtown or throughout Miami-Dade, and that is a beautiful way that AmeriCorps brings folks together.
I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for being back here again with us. AmeriCorps is an example of yet one other instance where there is no constitutional justification for the federal government be confiscating taxpayer resources and applying it in the most inefficient, unproductive way possible. That's just another example of money we don't have, doing something that we shouldn't be doing with forced confiscation of federal tax dollars. Mr. Ravis, thanks for being here. In your testimony, you mentioned that the National Service Trust Fund had a negative $62 million balance at the end of the fiscal year due to an inability to understand and apply basic accounting practices. In March of this year, just some 8-9 months ago, Congress passed a rescission of appropriations to the trust fund. As you know, that is this trust fund that's managed by AmeriCorps. But 6 months later, the rescission had not yet happened, but an AmeriCorps rep from the trust fund office reviewed the account with the Department of Treasury and still authorized a major purchase of federal securities. That purchase was on September 26. just 75 or so days ago, or 6 months after the rescission rather, but a few days later, the funds the law required to be rescinded were finally taken back, leaving the account with the $62 million negative balance on September 30. Sir, how can a federal agency spend money that Congress didn't give it?
Thank you for the question. We are still looking into this. We only found out about this at the end of October. What we can tell you is only what the agency has told us at this point, and that is that there was a negative fund balance in the trust at the end of fiscal year 2024. But our initial assessment is that this is a result of the lack of internal controls for financial management.
So what level of confidence would you have that the supposed reforms that have been talked about here today will work as they're intended?
Well, this area, financial reporting, is one of the areas the agency indicated where they have remediated the material weakness. They just have not yet implemented it. So time will tell, hopefully in 2025, for the 2025 audit, whether it...
This might be the audit. This might be the one, if that's what you're saying, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah, hope springs eternal, I guess. Mr. Smith, you didn't mention this in your testimony, but the negative number in the account indicates there was a likely violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which, as you know, prohibits an agency from spending more money than Congress appropriates. Why should we conclude anything other than the fact that the trust violated the Anti-Deficiency Act?
Mr. Good, thank you for your question. Our Office of General Counsel just completed a review of this challenge and found that there was no ADA violation. Let me explain. So our National Service Trust is the...
Okay, so you're saying there was an illegal violation, but at a minimum, this is horrible management of taxpayer funds. When will there be any accountability for the representative from AmeriCorps and the National Service Trust who facilitated this negative $62 million balance? Will there be any accountability for what took place?
There is accountability. There was always more than $1 billion in our National Service Trust account. There was one sub-account for 2.5 days that had a negative balance, but we were never in a position of not having enough money in order to pay our National Service Trust obligations.
Well, I appreciate your testimony, but do you think there should be any limit, and Mr. Ravis mentioned the next audit, should there be any limit on how many audits that AmeriCorps can fail before Congress eliminates the funding?
Mr. Good, I can't speak to what happened before I came here, but
You've had how many since you've got there? How many failed audits since you've been there?
So there were 5 years of failed disclaimed audit.
Right, and how many since you got there?
And we've had 3, and we've
Three
made
failed.
historic
So
investments
okay,
to
so
do something about it.
one's a concern, two's a real. I mean, three's a. When does it become a real problem under your watch, or when does it indicate that AmeriCorps is beyond salvation, if you will?
Mr. Good, I would say every single day AmeriCorps is delivering for the American people in extraordinary ways. I would also say, sitting with me today is Irv Dennis, who is our Senior Advisor for Financial Reform, who was the CFO under Secretary Carson, who turned around HUD, who had significantly more issues. It took HUD 4 to 5 years in order
So, hey, they
to get
failed
this done.
even worse than AmeriCorps is what you're saying. Their
ex-
failure was even worse, is that what you're saying?
Exponentially more, and Irv turned them around, literally wrote the book on how it done, which is why I hired him to help us, and
Well,
we now
it
have
seems
a plan.
basic and fundamental, that we wouldn't keep giving money to an organization that continues to fail audits. You would only do this in the federal government. You wouldn't do this with a charitable organization. You wouldn't keep giving it money. But this is borrowed money from the taxpayers. We don't have the money. Every dollar that's borrowed and spent by the federal government is either an increased tax on the citizens, or it's greater inflation that everybody's been suffering under because of this overspending, or it's increased debt that jeopardizes our future, and it's hurting the American people, and there's no constitutional justification for it, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize my colleague from California, Mr. Cano.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm aware that AmeriCorps' commitment to improving accountability has included taking on new support roles and responsibilities, including new security and reporting requirements mandated by Congress. Mr. Smith, does the agency have enough staff to achieve oversight and accountability goals?
We do, but in order to make sure we get to a clean audit opinion by 2026, we will continue to need to make an investment in this work. And that was part of the reason why I believe we ended up with this challenge, because there was not enough investment. But right now we do, which is also why the President's budget request next year for $10 million to support the 4 plan is so vitally important.
I want to give you a chance to kind of complete your answer so that people can clearly. The previous questioner asked you about audits under your tenure. Can you say more about that?
Thank you for the opportunity. As I said, there were 5 years of disclaimed audit opinions before I showed up. And when I came in, what we saw was years of a lack of investment in systems, operations, and people, technology updates that weren't being made, training that wasn't taking place, processes that weren't being put in place. Meanwhile, AmeriCorps was delivering for the American people. But what we did is we said, you know what, this can't be a one-off. We need to have an agency-wide, cross-departmental plan. We need to invest in leadership. Irv, my senior advisor, he talks about the idea of having 3 ifs. If you have leadership, if you have investment, and if you have accountability. And those were the things we put in place that are anchored into our financial and operational reform plan, which now has us on a path to have a clean audit by 2026. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but finally, you are seeing the results. You're seeing the results in more than 150 audit recommendations that have been cleaned up, the downgraded material weakness, a closed material weakness, in a relatively short amount of time since I was here to talk to the committee 2 years ago.
So bottom line, under your short tenure, you've had improved audits.
That's right, and I believe the Inspector General would agree with that, as would his previous colleague, Ms. Jeffries.
How does the annually appropriated budget for AmeriCorps compare to other small agencies with similar responsibilities?
Thank you for that question. We punch well above our weight. We're a relatively small federal agency with a very small salary and expenditure footprint. We spend about 3 to 5% on salaries and expenditures compared to around 12 to 14% of other federal agencies. So of the $1.3 billion that's allocated to AmeriCorps, more than $800 million goes directly out to our grantees. We have a relatively small staff footprint, and as I said in my opening statement, studies have shown that for every $1 federal dollar that's spent, we see $17 back. That's because our AmeriCorps members punch above their weight. There's matching requirements, and we see investment from the private sector, from state governments, and from local governments as well to match the federal investment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Ms. Ravis, in the past 2 audits, the agency discusses steps taken to enhance fraud prevention, detection, response strategies. Can you tell us about the measures the agency has implemented to detect and prevent fraud, and how successful have they been?
I'll leave it to Mr. Smith to talk about the steps that they've implemented. But what I can tell you is this: our work shows that the steps they've taken to prevent and detect fraud is not enough, and I think that's why it remains a top management challenge.
Okay. How is the agency cooperating with the Office of Inspector General, your office, to identify leading practices in anti-fraud measures and implementing them?
The agency has been very open to our suggestions, and we provide briefings and training on our work that they have welcomed. And I think that has helped shift the mindset of the agency in terms of what fraud prevention means.
So you see a willingness and eagerness to your suggestions, and therefore you are observing perhaps a change in culture at the agency with regard to these issues.
That's correct, sir.
I want to touch on one of the most critical elements of AmeriCorps volunteer programs, which is the investment in higher education. Riverside Community Colleges, my own district, has been a direct beneficiary of AmeriCorps, AmeriCorps' financial and programmatic support. Through the Californians for All College Corps, eligible students earn up to $10,000 pay for their ancillary expenses, which opens the doors for students who need a way to pay for their education and want to serve their community at the same time. Now, understand that a similar program for AmeriCorps program members, the Siegel Awards, is one of the best recruitment tools that AmeriCorps has at its disposal. Mr. Smith, I'm running out of time for you to be able to expound on that. Maybe another member will ask you about the Siegel Awards, but I thank you both for your testimony today, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to now recognize my colleague from, it's Mr. Rothman.
Thank you. Mr. Ravis, a second ago you mentioned the phrase time card fraud. I don't know if I've heard that phrase before. You want to elaborate on that?
Sure. In this instance, I'm referring to time and attendance fraud. Essentially, members' time. In order to earn a Siegel Education Award, a member has to serve a certain threshold amount of time. Once they earn that time and it's certified, the member would then earn the education award to be dispersed later to the institution of their choosing. In terms of fraud, we are seeing in some programs where the programs are not monitoring the actual amount served, and the time on those time cards is not correct, and therefore individuals are earning education awards when they shouldn't.
Okay, so the people committing fraud are they called them volunteers a second ago. I'll digress for a second. When you use the phrase volunteers, these people are all getting paid, aren't they? Or usually paid?
So in this instance, I was using the term member. That's on the AmeriCorps side. They receive living allowances and can earn an education award. I'm not aware that they are paid a salary.
Okay, well, coming back to time card fraud, you're saying the volunteers or whatever are claiming they're putting in more hours than they are in some cases?
Yeah, I think this is less about the members and more about the grantee organizations and the.
Oh, the whole organizations are committing fraud.
What they're doing is they are not paying attention to the time or trying to inflate the time in order for them to earn their education award.
Okay. Next question. Most people who work for AmeriCorps, are they paid or are they what we call volunteers? Or how tax-wise does that work?
I can't speak to the numbers. I think Mr. Smith would have a better idea of that, but there are certainly a large number of members and volunteers.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you want to?
Thank you, Congressman. I mentioned there are 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers. Around 60,000 are AmeriCorps members that work up to 1,700 hours a week, and they receive a living allowance to pay for housing and food. But the vast majority of our folks are AmeriCorps senior volunteers, more than 100,000 that are part of our retired senior volunteers program that do everything from Meals on Wheels to tax prep, and they are volunteers.
Okay. I'll give you a general question here. I was always under the impression that one of the goals of AmeriCorps is to provide some work experience for people. Right now, America has a labor shortage. And I would think if I'm an employer, to a certain extent because of the negative publicity of AmeriCorps, but also because you're really not in an organization that has to accomplish something or make a customer happy, that I would, under normal circumstances, much more likely to hire somebody who, say, worked for McDonald's, which is kind of a high-pressure job. Those guys really work hard. I know our president-to-be recently discovered that. But I would have, given that, do you feel if somebody in the private sector was looking at two people, someone, like I said, in McDonald's, somebody in AmeriCorps, where, the audits kind of show things are kind of loosey-goosey. Don't you feel that the people in the private sector would have a leg up if you were hiring somebody?
Thank you for that question. The private sector loves AmeriCorps. In fact, we have about 600 employers that take part in our Employers of National Service program because they want people that are passionate, dedicated, who learn how to sometimes spend gold with straw and do extraordinary work under pressure, being given projects to get things done in communities. And so that's why more than 600 employers have prioritized AmeriCorps members in their application process. Employers like Deloitte, for instance, that have worked with our AmeriCorps grantee City Year for many, many years.
AmeriCorps has failed an audit for 8 consecutive years. 2 years ago, they told this committee that a clean audit would take several years. 2 years later, it's hard to see much progress. Can you give us a specific year in which you expect AmeriCorps to receive a clean audit?
Thank you, sir. Our financial and operational reform plan has us at a clean audit opinion in 2026.
Okay, so about 2 years from now. Okay. One more question for Mr. Ravis. I understand the auditors found 11 material weaknesses in AmeriCorps, 8 of which have existed since 2018. Can you rattle off what these weaknesses are?
The major ones, I can rattle off the major ones, which are financial reporting, internal control environment, and the trust obligations and liabilities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to recognize my colleague from Georgia, Ms. Macbeth.
Thank you, Chair Owens, and thank you, Ranking Member Wilson. And thank you to our witnesses that are here with us today. It's good to see you again, Mr. Smith. I truly understand the gravity of another failed audit, as we all do, and how important it is that these issues be addressed. which it appears you have taken extensive time and energy to do so. But I also understand the very critical role that AmeriCorps and community service play in Americans' everyday lives. And I know that coming from Georgia and all of the problems that we've had with natural disasters lately, I know what that means for us in Georgia. Whether it's cleaning up after a disaster, ensuring that there are enough teachers in our poorest schools, or helping to provide a smooth transition into adulthood for foster youth, AmeriCorps programs change lives for the better and encourage service to our greater community. AmeriCorps embodies the spirit of American volunteerism and puts folks face to face with some of our nation's most poignant questions, like what can or should I be doing to give back to our country that has given us so very much. Asking not what your country can do for you, but basically what can you do for your country and for those that live among you. Now, I share the deep concerns that everyone has about the financial state of AmeriCorps, and we've been talking about that extensively, but I disagree with the misguided and the politically motivated push to dismantle this really, really important program, a program authorized under a Republican president that has long been a target of certain extreme conservatives who simply don't believe that it should exist at all. Over the past few months, back-to-back hurricanes, Helene and Milton, have devastated the Southeast and my home state of Georgia, killing over 250 people across the South and causing hundreds of billions of dollars in damage in the Carolinas, Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. As members here unfortunately know from their own districts, entire towns were destroyed and left totally inaccessible. Since then, almost 1,000 AmeriCorps members have been deployed, and many more, as you have mentioned, to help support folks in their time of need and help them to rebuild their homes, their businesses, and just really rebuild their entire lives. Mr. Smith, my question is for you, is that can you succinctly tell me specifically, for Georgia, I'm really interested, how many AmeriCorps members are assisting in the storm cleanup efforts now, and can you talk about where they are and the type of work that they're specifically doing on the ground?
Congresswoman, thank you so much. It's good to see you. I don't have the specific number for AmeriCorps members that are working on disaster response in Georgia. I tell you that we've had more than 1,000 that are throughout the Southeast that have been working in a variety of ways. One of the ways they provide disaster survivor assistance, so making sure that folks that are dealing with horrific challenges know where to go to get the resources to begin to rebuild their lives. They're actually mucking and gutting houses. They're doing mold remediation. They're helping with rebuilding. We also have folks that are managing various donations that are coming in. And we have our FEMA Corps program, where for the past 12 years, FEMA has had their own AmeriCorps teams, which they're teaching emergency management skills, and that they're embedded within them so that they're doing a variety of service, not only responding to residents with disaster survivor assistance, but consolidating information, doing mapping, and helping to support FEMA staff.
Well, thank you for that. And I do want to emphasize that these are the types of programs that we're talking about when we discuss the important work of AmeriCorps. These are the programs that are going to be cut. The communities and the people that will be further left behind if we work to dismantle these programs instead of making good faith efforts to fix these programs, to fix the issues are at hand. And as you're hearing today, in full faith effort, the AmeriCorps representatives that sit before us today are doing that very thing. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to doing what I can to give you and AmeriCorps the appropriate resources to continue the good progress and improving upon the financial situation that you inherited in 2021 as the incoming CEO. Instead of dismantling programs that bring us together, by encouraging volunteerism and civic engagement, we should be taking steps to improve them. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so much. I'd like now to yield to my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Smith, thank you for the work that you've been doing. You came in at a very difficult time. I was here when you were before the committee 2 years ago, and quite frankly, you've kept the promises that you honestly shared. There would be no immediate really reconciling, but it'd be a matter of progress, and I'll come back to that. You know, as myself personally, as an Eagle Scout, Scoutmaster, and co-chair of the Congressional Service Organization Caucus and the Congressional Scouting Caucus, I'm keenly aware of the vast benefits and value of service to our country. In fact, the 2017 Gallup poll shows that nearly half of Americans favor some type of mandatory national service post-high school. They see a value in that. AmeriCorps has a worthy mission to prepare students for modern jobs, support neighborhoods on the road to economic recovery, and promote health and well-being, among others. I believe it also has a key role that needs to be more clearly articulated in the leadership development and the preparation to be, to be a serving citizen post the experience of AmeriCorps. And I'd like to see more data on that, actually. I'm tracking where these AmeriCorps participants are in the future. What are they doing? That is the true return on investment. That is, I mean, there's a lot of ROIs you could look at, but that is probably the most important with the biggest payback going forward. I've been a supporter of AmeriCorps' vision, and I've seen firsthand the rewarding work that's made possible through these programs, like the Keystone Smiles program in my district, benefits to help reduce those who are living in poverty, to the community and the community good, economic activity, to the personal and leadership development of the participants. Unfortunately, AmeriCorps cannot accomplish these goals or fulfill its mission totally if it continues to misuse taxpayer dollars. And I know that 2 years ago you were very clear that it would take 3 to 5 years to complete this turnaround. And so I don't know why any member of this body would be surprised that, that it's not completely remediated at this point. You were upfront and insightful at that point. And I appreciate that kind of honesty. That's what I expect when folks come before the committee. But I appreciate the progress that's being made. I look forward to, as you said, I think 2025, where we would see kind of a clean bill of health in terms of how at the national level AmeriCorps is operated. I share several of the concerns my colleagues have already expressed with the organization's most recent failed audit and want to address some of these issues. And so this question is for Mr. Ravis. I've always said that education is the pathway to opportunity. And as you know, AmeriCorps sets aside funds to pay education awards for members who successfully complete their programs. My understanding is AmeriCorps estimates the education awards to be $287 million. Were independent auditors able to verify that that number is correct?
I'm not sure the answer to that question. I'd have to check with my team and get back to you or your staff after the testimony.
Sure, I appreciate it. If you could have them get back to me, I very much appreciate it. And so we don't. So you don't know whether the auditors were, whether that's been verified or not. I'd love to know if it wasn't correct, why were auditors unable to verify this as well. Mr. Smith, this is a crucial piece of information and one that's critical to carrying out AmeriCorps' mission to help educate students nationwide. Do you agree that AmeriCorps needs to provide to Congress and the public that it can provide the payments that its programs promise?
I absolutely agree, sir.
One of the other challenges I see with AmeriCorps is the lack of transparency and reporting on what happens with youth following their participation in a program. As you likely know, most other federal education programs track student progress following their completion, sometimes long-term. I'm particularly concerned about this since it makes it difficult to assess, for example, credentials or hard skills that AmeriCorps participants that I believe they receive, but if we're not tracking it, we're not reporting it, and these are important because what they may earn in a program that prepares them for a 21st century economy. Existing return on investment analysis from AmeriCorps fails to assess the entire program instead of cherry-picking programs across the country, leaving critical gaps in both your and our understanding of the program's success. And so I just would ask that, I look forward to following up and see, because of my time, what changes you plan to make at AmeriCorps to ensure students are obtaining the skills, hard and soft skills necessary to succeed in today's economy, and how AmeriCorps is tracking and communicating that progress. Chairman, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I'd like now to recognize my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, right now there are 149 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps seniors volunteering with nonprofit, faith, and community-based organizations across Virginia, including Literacy Labs Virginia Reading Corps, Habitat for Humanity Peninsula and Greater Williamsburg, and the Hampton Roads Workforce Foundation. I consider the work of AmeriCorps across this country as vital work to strengthen the civic engagement and provide a sense of community. Is the work in Virginia representative of the work being done across the country?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. It absolutely is. It's hyper-local. It's being responsive to local needs. In Virginia, I've had the opportunity to see everything from our AmeriCorps members in schools to the AmeriCorps members that you met that were building houses with Habitat for Humanity, to AmeriCorps members that were substance abuse survivors that are working in the Virginia Recovery Corps. And that's the beauty of AmeriCorps. It gets to be hyper-responsive to local needs.
You recognize that the failure to produce a clean audit threatens these kinds of programs.
I do recognize that, which is why I've taken it so seriously.
Okay, now, about a year ago, you were given a list of recommendations, I think it was from the IG, or GAO or the IG. Where was the list, where'd the list come from?
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe you're referring to the GAO recommendations related to fraud.
Okay. What is the status of the recommendations?
Thank you for that question. So we've actually closed 9 out of 10 of those recommendations to be more aligned with their leading practices. And the 10th recommendation will be closed as well. We're just waiting for our upcoming grant terms and conditions to be released. What I'm proud of, sir, is the vast majority of those recommendations we were already working on before we even received the list from GAO.
Now, are there other problems that were not on that list?
I believe they did a good job of helping to identify some of the challenges that we had already begun to mitigate.
So if you've solved all the problems, why does it take 2 more years to get a clean audit?
Thank you, sir. So I was specifically referring to the fraud recommendations that came from GAO. As you know, there are many more recommendations related to the material weaknesses that we're facing with our audit challenges, the various other recommendations. We've closed more than 150 audit recommendations. We've downgraded a material weakness, closed another material weakness. We've made extraordinary progress on our FISMA and cybersecurity standing. We've closed some that were more than a decade old, but there are still more challenges that we have to work through.
Did you request more staff or resources to get through that list?
Yes, we did. The President's FY25 budget calls for an additional $10 million to support the 4 plan, and also an increase, I believe, to $126 million for $127 million for salaries and expenditures. I'm proud that AmeriCorps is lean, that most of our money goes to our grantees, but actually when I look at what led us to having some of these historic challenges is we just simply were not investing in systems, operations, and people, and we have to turn that around.
And do you know the status of that appropriation?
We look forward to hearing from Congress.
Well, the budget's almost done. Do you know if it's in there?
I do not know where the final numbers stand. We are hopeful that we're going to get towards the President's budget request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize the full committee chair, Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. It feels like deja vu every time we discuss AmeriCorps and its inability to accurately track its own finances. Mr. Ravis, AmeriCorps has failed its audit for the 8th consecutive year. Is it correct to say that an auditor's, quote, disclaimer of opinion means the accuracy of AmeriCorps' financial statements cannot be trusted?
That's correct, ma'am.
Mr. Ravis, in your testimony, you talked about AmeriCorps' contract to upgrade its IT systems. I'm shocked to hear the cost of the contract has ballooned to over $18 million, more than double the original contract. Before I ask about this contract, is it correct that AmeriCorps has already spent over $34 million on this issue in previous contracts?
My understanding is yes, there was a $34 million write-off back in 2018.
Have there been tangible results as a result of that $34 million expenditure?
I don't believe so.
Can you explain why the cost for this contract has also exploded, yet again costing American taxpayers millions of dollars?
Yes, we're still looking into this issue, but our early assessment, we've come up with 3 reasons. The first is that the agency used a firm fixed price contract, even though there were unknown requirements at the time of contracting, and despite its past experience that these types of contracts, the cost can quickly rise. The second issue was there was a lack of involvement of technical experts. There was a technical expert on the contract management team from the Office of Information Technology, but that individual was assigned to another project and wasn't there for most of the management. And finally, the contract was de-scoped, but the agency was not considering how it was going to pay for the de-scoped requirements.
You used a lot of words to describe incompetence. That's exactly, it boils down to one word, incompetence. Mr. Smith, you have a strange sense of pride. You are proud of some really unusual things. In your testimony, you talked about AmeriCorps' supposed, quote, return on investment, end quote, in its programs. Given that AmeriCorps hasn't known where its money is for the last 8 years and counting, I'm doubtful we know the true cost of AmeriCorps programs at all. Did any of these AmeriCorps studies compare AmeriCorps to actions by the private sector using the same or fewer amount of funds?
Dr. Fox, thank you for your
It's a
service.
simple answer, yes or no.
I'll have to go back and look to see what the comparisons were, but I don't believe you can find a better return on investment than 17-to-1 for the type of work that we do.
Again, you have a strange sense of what's good and not good. I understand many of these AmeriCorps studies were cherry-picked from different programs across the nation. What seems more common to me are wasteful and fraudulent programs. In recent years, there have been multiple examples of AmeriCorps fraud, including $1.7 million here in D.C., $2.1 million in Denver, $2.5 million in San Francisco. This year, your own annual report, with its unaudited numbers, estimated over $40 million in improper payments in just 2 programs. Of course, this is just the fraud we know of. Mr. Smith, do you think fraudulent programs and improper payments provide a good ROI for taxpayer dollars?
Absolutely not. And there's no evidence to prove that AmeriCorps sees any more fraud than any other federal agency, but there is evidence to show that we are doing something about it.
In the past 8 years, American taxpayers have given AmeriCorps over $8 billion and gotten 8 straight failed audits, waste, fraud, and fraud in return. It is the poster child for waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. The answer is certainly not more funding. It's time to cut taxpayer losses and eliminate AmeriCorps. It can't come fast enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to now recognize my colleague from North Carolina, Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony today. Mr. Ravis, what do you believe is a reasonable and necessary timeline for the AmeriCorps team to implement the most impactful recommendations?
Our view is that there's not one recommendation or material weakness that is a priority. It's only when the agency implements all of the recommendations that they'll have sound financial management.
So what actions do you believe the agency will have to take immediately to be able to achieve this target?
Well, I think immediately they should be implementing the material weaknesses, the 4 material weaknesses that they've already remediated, so that we can test and validate them in our fiscal year 2025 audit.
So how has OIG been working with AmeriCorps to help achieve this timeline?
Myself, I have frequent discussions with Mr. Smith and his chief of staff on a biweekly basis where we talk about this and other matters, and our independent auditors and our audit team here at AmeriCorps OIG have numerous meetings across each month to assess progress, get documents, and discuss issues.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, I'd like to talk to you a bit about Hurricane Helene and AmeriCorps' role in supporting the long-term recovery of impacted communities. For example, while we might not see the immediate health effects of mold from house flooding, and families will be impacted by it for years to come. AmeriCorps members were in North Carolina in those first few critical days to the muck and gut houses to prevent them from being overrun with mold. So could you speak more about AmeriCorps' holistic approach to planning for both the immediate and the long-term impacts of natural disasters?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I am so proud of the work AmeriCorps does in disaster response. I actually first came to know this agency after Hurricane Katrina. In the decade after Hurricane Katrina, we had 40,000 AmeriCorps members that showed up to support people in Louisiana and Mississippi. And I was actually just there this summer, where many of those folks are still a part of the community. So we are there in the immediate aftermath to do mucking and gutting. We are there long after the cameras are gone, when kids need to go back to schools and they need additional support. And we are there for the long term to move from recovery to rebuilding to resilience. I'm also proud that we are ready to go. So when a disaster strikes, our AmeriCorps members know how to use saws. They know how to do mold remediation. They've been given certifications with industry standards. And so we can deploy our members to be there and be effective when they're needed most.
Okay, so I thank you for that. I've seen just how devastating Hurricane Helene has been for North Carolinians as climate change worsens and natural disasters happen more frequently as a result. Our nation needs a workforce that's trained to prepare our country for these challenges. The Biden administration launched the AmeriCorps, which recruits and trains volunteers to do climate resilience and mitigation activities. This is modeled after the New Deal program, the Civilian Conservation Corps, which hired young unemployed men to work to protect and preserve public land. So can you describe how this work is going? And can you also confirm the authority that this program is under?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I'll start there. AmeriCorps has an authority and obligation to act on our statute, which requires us to do environmental stewardship work. And we also have the authority to enter into interagency partnerships, with every single administration has done, from Clinton to Trump and now. The American Climate Corps was a program that allowed us to get a shot in the arm and to bring more energy and attention to the environmental stewardship work that we have been doing for a long time. Last year, we had about 15,000 AmeriCorps members that were working on fire mitigation, coastal erosion, and our public parks and public spaces. We just launched a new program called the Energy Communities AmeriCorps program, which is helping folks that might be in communities affected by brown sites or in coal mining communities transition into new jobs. And so this has been wonderful to see the excitement and intention of young people to want to make a difference on conservation and climate issues while learning the skills that they need to get those jobs going forward.
Okay, let me ask you real quick. Is it correct that ACC volunteers are being recruited under the authority of the NCCC, VISTA, and the state and national programs?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to now recognize my colleague, Mr. Courtney. Is he here? Okay. I'd like to recognize Mr. Sublin. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, gentlemen. This is a very important program to many Americans, to my district too. I'm from the Northern Mariana Islands. You won't find it on the map, Mr. Smith. But it is a good program. This is also my last hearing, and I re-injured my back, but I made it a point to come here to tell you that this is a good program. But let me ask Mr. Ravis, sir, you have a disclaim audit. The disclaimer would be, is that like qualified opinion? Would you say a qualified opinion in an audit?
A disclaimer is not a qualified opinion, but there is such thing as a qualified opinion.
Yes, I'm
yes.
aware of that.
Yes.
So, which is,
This one is a disclaimer, sir.
okay. But you're working closely already trying to fix many of the weaknesses, internal weaknesses, right? That would be the problem, right? It would be in the internal weaknesses, because if those mechanisms, those control work, then things would be, so they're working on it.
Correct. Our role is to test their internal controls, and they have their plan in which they're remediating processes and procedures.
So you said independent auditors as well. That would be an outside group that comes in and does independent. Do they issue a qualified opinion?
My understanding is they can issue a qualified
They
opinion.
can, of course. Based on their license, they have an obligation to issue a qualified opinion or no opinion, actually. Are you aware if they have issued that?
That's not my understanding, but I can check with them.
Okay, no, I'm just, if it's not, then, yeah, I mean, we could work more with Mr. Smith, because that would be a problem. And I wanted to thank you for your service, sir, and wish you all well. Thank you for
Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize my colleague from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I just walked in as my colleague and good friend, Mr. Sablan, who we've served together for so many years on this committee, announced that this is his final hearing. And again, he has just been a pillar and a stalwart on this committee. And
Joe's a nice guy.
but I mean, really, you've contributed so much, and we're going to miss you. And congratulations again on an outstanding career. And Mrs. Fox is not here. We know she's going to be around, but obviously giving up the gavel is a big moment for her. And again, want to salute her service as chair for many years. So again, it's great to see you here again, Mr. Smith. And I was, again, thinking about your trip to my district back in 2023 when the AmeriCorps sponsored Veterans Coffee House in Mystic, Connecticut was having their monthly meeting. And again, this is a AmeriCorps-initiated initiative which, again, brings together veterans in a really super welcoming and friendly environment. It accomplishes significant things, though, in terms of being a place where new information from the VA, the military, is exchanged. And again, this district actually has the highest concentration of veterans, 2nd District of Connecticut, and there's just no question that what AmeriCorps does there has really made a difference to veterans who are not aware of the fact that there were programs and services available to them. We've had veterans who've connected to disability eligibility and are getting now monthly checks for the service-connected injuries that clearly entitled them to that help. And really, if it wasn't for these sort of networking connections that took place because of basically a volunteer-driven event, it never would have happened. That day you and I were there, you may recall, it was a 99-year-old veteran, Mr. Neil Spillane, who was a World War II veteran. He crossed over onto Normandy Beach after the first wave and fought his way through the Battle of the Hedgerows in France. And his unit was actually one of the first, if not the first, that entered Germany. Amazing individual who's gone on to do great things. for the Navy after the war, in Electric Boat Shipyard, where, again, he was a top engineer and executive when the time came to convert our submarine fleet to a nuclear-powered. So anyway, he's now like a regular at those meetings. And again, his wisdom and perspective. He turned 100 last March, and again, it's again those kinds of things that I think show the value of what AmeriCorps brings to the table. So one item I just want to again, and I've done this at other past hearings, is that the biggest agency in the federal government is the Department of Defense. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee. I've been there for 18 years. They have never passed an audit as a department, never, okay? They've made some progress. I was on the subcommittee on auditability a number of years ago, which put into statute the fact that they have to hit a 2028 target to accomplish that. The Marine Corps has done it, hoorah, but the other branches have not. And I mean, no one is suggesting that we terminate or scale back, our military service, but they're showing progress just like you are. And really that's the test that I think all of us should have as part of oversight, which is to kind of keep our foot on, the process and keep it moving forward, but to not just sort of, use some kind of broad brush sanctions or penalties, which again eliminates what is, as I said, I've seen it myself, the value and return on investment that AmeriCorps provides. So again, if there's something we can do to help the process accelerate, whether it's funding again some of these technical upgrades that are needed. I mean, that to me is what we need to hear if we want to kind of keep the momentum moving forward. I've only given you 23 seconds left, but maybe you could just comment quickly.
It's good to see you again, sir. I would say what this agency will need, as you know, I won't be here in a couple months. We can't take our foot off the gas. I'm proud of the work that we've done to turn around decades of underinvestment. It will take funding, meeting the president's funding request. It will take continued oversight. I'm also so proud of the work that we do. We have 15,000 veterans that serve in AmeriCorps, and we serve 245,000 veterans in military families. I was actually just here with our 4-Country Caucus, who believes that America is better when people are asked to serve, whether it's overseas or here at home through AmeriCorps programs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize my colleague, Ms. Bartamici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take our committee's oversight responsibilities seriously, as does every member on this committee. And as others have pointed out, AmeriCorps has received numerous failed audits over the past several years. And as with any federal agency, we must hold the Corporation for National and Community Service accountable for responsible use of taxpayer dollars. I'm encouraged by the recent efforts that AmeriCorps has made to rectify the identified deficiencies, but we acknowledge that there's more work to be done. Well, that being said, I want to follow up on Representative Courtney's comments and highlight the value of AmeriCorps' programs at the state and local levels. So in my home state of Oregon, there are close to 2,000 members and volunteers who are serving in communities across the state. Here on the Education Committee, and particularly on the Subcommittee on Higher Education, we talk about reducing the cost of higher education. And you look at the Siegel Education Awards, where people can put in community service and earn some dollars that help them pay for higher education. And in Oregon, we have AmeriCorps members and volunteers, particularly a lot in the AmeriCorps seniors, doing amazing work with organizations. We have College Possible, Northwest Youth Corps, Forest Grove School District, Mental Health Association of Oregon, to name a few, and more than 100 mayors sent us a letter in support of AmeriCorps. So these are some of the individuals and organizations that would stand to lose the service that they're all benefiting from if, as some members of this committee would like to do, AmeriCorps would be eliminated. Instead, we should be not penalizing local communities and taking away those opportunities. We should be looking at how we remedy the fault. So, Mr. Ravis, the external auditor's findings show that there are several areas in which AmeriCorps and the National Service Trust can improve their financial management and internal controls. So which of these should be a priority for AmeriCorps and why?
Our view is that there's not one material weakness or recommendation that should be prioritized. And in fact, the agency's plan does not focus on material weaknesses. It focuses on a more holistic approach from what I understand. It's only when all the recommendations are implemented and we're able to, analyze those and test them that we can finally determine that they've achieved sound financial management.
I appreciate that. So Mr. Smith, thank you for your service at AmeriCorps. I'm glad to hear that AmeriCorps is making progress, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about the holistic approach, because there are several findings in the recent audit. So which are you on target to meet for remediation within the next year? And how long would you expect, using this holistic approach, it would take for all of the remediation actions to be fully implemented?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for that question. So our financial and operational reform plan shows us getting to a clean audit opinion in 2026. What we have done, as Mr. Ravis pointed out, is we focused on the whole. There are internal controls that have to be fixed. There are systems that have to be fixed. There are processes that have to be fixed. There is modernization, and every single employee at AmeriCorps needs to take ownership, and every single department needs to take ownership. And that's why you're seeing the results that you're seeing with over 150 recommendations closed, one downgraded material weakness, one closed material weakness, incredible improvement in our FSMA compliance. That is because the holistic approach that we've taken, and that is the approach that was taken at HUD that was able to see them turned around in 4 years.
And can you confidently say that you will expect that 2026 target to be met?
I feel confident if we continue to make the level of investment, if we get the president's budget request, if the incoming administration continues to support our systems, operations, and people, and our financial and operational reform plan, we will get to a clean audit by 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and I hope that next time AmeriCorps is before the committee, we will see that progress. And Mr. Chairman, as I yield back, I would like to ask the committee to extend a welcome to my niece's daughter, Miss Hannah Flame, who's she's 7, and she's in the committee room today because she's here learning about the U.S. government. So
Thank you
please
so
extend your
much.
welcome.
Thank you so much. That's the way we pass our legacy on. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'd like to recognize from North Carolina, Ms. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I know that we wish you could come back with a clean audit, but that it's going to take, as you said, many, many years to get to that point, and we understand that. But Mr. Ravis, I do want to ask, in September, you put out a management alert that flagged cost overruns in the grant management software that AmeriCorps has tried to implement for several years now. And specifically, you estimate that the contract is now $9 million, double the original amount of the contract. This is after AmeriCorps spent $33.8 million on software that produced no final product. Do you have an update on how AmeriCorps is addressing this management alert?
We're still looking into the matter, but we passed along our suggestions as part of the management alert as soon as we uncovered the issue, and our hope is that the agency will seriously consider those recommendations as they contract and manage future contracts, including those for the grant management system and their member management system.
Can you explain why the $33.8 million investment in software did not produce a final product?
That was a little before my time. My understanding was that they couldn't end up with a usable product at the end of the development phase.
And it took $33 million to realize that they weren't going to end up with a usable product?
That's my understanding, but that was back in 2018.
Are there procedures in place to look at processes earlier so that we don't spend so much money before determining that a product just isn't going to reach fruition?
That's what we're looking into now as a result of this management alert, and our hope is that there is.
Okay, well, I would hope that you reach that point sooner rather than later, because we hate to waste taxpayer money on those kinds of things. That being said, I would like to talk a little bit about the good work that AmeriCorps does. In a recent press release, the chairwoman of this committee stated her desire to close AmeriCorps' doors and tear down the agency brick by brick. And while I do believe, as I just mentioned, that AmeriCorps needs to pursue fundamental changes in order to ensure that it's using public funds responsibly, I want to highlight some of the work that this program is doing in my state of North Carolina, particularly in the wake of Hurricane Helene. And Mr. Smith, Do you know how many AmeriCorps volunteers are actively serving in North Carolina as part of the Helene response?
So throughout the Southeast, we have about 1,000 AmeriCorps members that are working on Helene and Milton.
My understanding is that there are at least 130 AmeriCorps workers in North Carolina. And do you know whether they are working in Ashe County, in Wilkes County, in Watauga County?
Those counties sound familiar, but I would need to double check with my team to make sure they're still there.
I would appreciate it if you could find out for us whether they were working in those counties and whether they are continuing to do work in those counties. Ashe County, Wilkes County, Watauga County, those are all areas that were very hard hit by Hurricane Helene and caused severe damage. Can you tell us what the members are doing who are working in North Carolina on Helene recovery?
Thank you, Congresswoman. There's a mix of services that AmeriCorps members provide after hurricanes. One is disaster survivor assistance to make sure that survivors know how to get access to resources, which can be absolutely overwhelming for folks. Then they do a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of mucking and gutting of houses, mold remediation, tearing down walls, those sorts of things, which they get done in record time, and residents are always shocked that they're able to do it so quickly. And then they work with our Federal Emergency Management Agency to support response, to make sure we're sending resources to the right places.
The volunteers that you get in AmeriCorps, do they come from any particular background, or do they come from all different walks of life?
AmeriCorps looks like America. They're from rural communities, inner city communities, they're from tribal nations, every single race, color, creed, and ideology.
And do you find that the people who come from all across America, from all different backgrounds, when they work together, they build friendships and they build bonds of understanding?
I actually have data to back that up. 80% of AmeriCorps alumni say they are more comfortable working with people from other differences. 72% of AmeriCorps alums said they actually changed a belief system after their AmeriCorps service, which I don't know when's the last time that's happened for any of us.
Well, as you know, we are living in a time of terrible partisan divide. And so do you believe, in addition to the hands-on work that they do to help people who've been victims of disaster, do you believe that it's a good thing in this country for us to have a volunteer agency with Americans from all different backgrounds who can build bonds of friendship and learn to understand each other better?
It's absolutely right. We've been focusing on bridging, reversing polarization, because the data shows there is something about ongoing sustained service that allows individuals to see each other's humanity. And I have seen that across the country every day, where people are coming together to make a difference in their own neighborhoods.
If nothing else, in this time of acrimonious behavior toward people from different backgrounds and different political parties, I think that aspect of AmeriCorps needs to be highlighted, because I think it is so valuable, and that is worth keeping in this country. So with that, I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Ms. Smith and Mr. Ravis. Appreciate your testimony. I'd like to recognize Ms. Williams for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Owens, and thank you once again to our witnesses for speaking with us today. AmeriCorps members and volunteers are a critical resource for communities across the country. Neglecting or eliminating this long-standing institution would be a disservice not only to the oversight process, but to the countless Americans that benefit from the work AmeriCorps does in our communities. To do this work properly, AmeriCorps requires aggressive and immediate reform to its existing financial system. I'm pleased to note that it wasn't until the current AmeriCorps leadership appointed by the Biden administration did the agency finally start taking these issues seriously and make the necessary actions needed to remediate them. But much work remains to be done. So it is our duty as a committee to step up and help them in their hour of need, not threaten draconian action against an organization whose ultimate goal is to foster civic engagement and positive change in our districts. I look forward to working with AmeriCorps to reform and modernize its financial management so the agency can continue its invaluable work on behalf of all Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I appreciate that. Let me just, I guess, start off with probably the most important numbers I can give everybody today. We're $37 trillion in debt. That's an amazing threat to our culture, our future, our kids. And it's nice to have programs that have a nice mission statement. But at the end of the day, we need data. And that's the biggest concern. We have issues where $40 million has been wasted, fraud, theft. This is real dollars from real people investing in our government thinking we're going to get a return on investment. We don't get a return on investment when people take $40 million in one deal. There's no consequences. Nobody goes to jail. We find out years later that it happened. These are the kind of things we need to deal with. It concerns me when the mission starts with a very good mission of bringing us together, service. That's a great concept that began decades ago. We're now talking about DEI, which we look at each other inside out versus outside in. That's not bringing us together. That does just the opposite. And there's no data that DEI has had any positive impact on anything that it's been part of. So that messes up the message of the theme of what this is all about when we bring those type of ideologies into it. My thought is very simply, we need to get back on mission. This country comes together when we serve. Sometimes that's the best is serving in the private market with the actual return on investment. $40 million into something else might have given us a better return. We need to look at that. That's what it comes down to. It's not just feeling good. It's getting the kind of data, the type of things we need to get done here. So I would say this has been helpful. The fact that we're talking about this, we now have another date. I guess, Tony, 1 second. Okay. We now have another date. I would like to, before we close up, recognize my colleague, Congressman Ledger Fernandez, for a brief statement. Can we do that now?
Thank you. I truly appreciate that, Chairman, and my apologies. This place calls us and pulls us in so many different directions, and so I will not be asking questions, but I just wanted to make a statement about the value that AmeriCorps brings to places like New Mexico, brings to places where we have seen disasters, whether that be in North Carolina or Florida or in my own beloved state of New Mexico, where we had AmeriCorps on the ground after we suffered one of the largest, the historic largest fire in the United States, which sadly was started by one federal agency, the Forest Department, and yet we had other federal agencies coming to our help, and AmeriCorps was there. And it is something where we see AmeriCorps not just something great on paper, it is something where you are on the ground. And I want to remember something that one of my heroes spoke about, and that is Secretary John Gardner. Secretary John Gardner served in Johnson's cabinet. He actually resigned because he was upset about the Vietnam War, but before he resigned, he helped start Head Start. He helped start so many programs, and he always talked about the importance of becoming a loving critic of our federal agencies. And his words were, "I pity the leader caught between unloving critics and uncritical lovers." And what he was talking about is the importance that when you love something, you must be willing to critique it, to say, you have done this, can you do better? We expect you to do better. And so that's what I would say now to AmeriCorps, is we love the work you do. We need to call upon our citizens to be better citizens, to be part of something bigger than they are, which AmeriCorps offers. And so with that, we love the work you do. It is important for America. It's important for our students who need that help, but we must also be loving critics and call upon you to right these errors so that we can continue investing and believing in the work you do. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to close out just by saying again, thank you. It's all about return on investments, my friends. return on investments. We got to give the American people exactly what they're investing into, and we cannot continue to say, well, it's just the way it is. We have to get back to really being good stewards of the money we're given. So we're going to make sure we're talking about this, holding everybody accountable. With that, I'd like to again thank the witnesses for taking the time to testify before the subcommittee today. Without objections, there'll be no further business, and the subcommittee stands adjourned.